Leadership is about noticing something and then saying something about it.
Hmm.
When you get poor leadership, it's often because you've noticed something and you haven't said something about it.
Hello, and welcome back to the Family Wealth Edge. Vincent, you have a guest speaker for us today that I'm super excited about.
We do. Nice to see you again, Kristen. Today, we're very happy to welcome Keita Demming onto the podcast today. Keita, how are you?
Pretty good, especially now that I'm with you two.
Oh, good. Let's kick it off. So Keita has an incredible career story. Hopefully, he'll weave some of that into our talk today. Just to give you a quick little bio background on our friend here. Keita is an award-winning educator and coach. He has a PhD in adult education and workplace learning. I think you're the first PhD on this podcast, Keita. So thank you for breaking the ice for us to have our first PhD on. His work has been involved with advisors, business owners for probably 20 years now. Work takes him all over the world and speaking to audiences and folks. He's also been very active in the family enterprise Canadian space, if I can use better English, in helping curate our symposiums the last number of years. So Keita, welcome again.
Looking forward to this conversation. The two of you have been such fun in the lead up to this, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be fun.
As we do on podcasts, there's been some bloopers getting this one going today. So we're happy to finally get it going and recording. Keita, tell us a bit more about you, your story, how you've arrived on this podcast today.
Yeah. I think my story is like, it's long and all of that, but I think the most important pieces around my story is that I'm really passionate about how to become better people in business so to become better business people. So sometimes that involves families and learning how do we show up as our best selves so that we can work together and play together at the same time, because sometimes we can only do one of those because of family histories and relationships, etc. And if you boil down my work, it comes down to how do we have the conversations we're avoiding faster. That's my work in a nutshell. And I found that how I got to that, etc., is a bit of a longer story. It's through my PhD, through theoretical work, through like experience with leadership, experience with entrepreneurs. I often say, and I got this from a researcher, organizations are conversations and not machines. And if we think about it, conversations are the action. And if we have the conversation, we've taken the action. So that's a little bit about me.
That's beautiful. I love the concept that you're introducing, and I don't think I've heard it before, about organizations being mischaracterized as machines in the new lens that you bring on that. Can you zoom in on that concept?
So if you look at the history of organizations, you look at like theorists like Ford and Taylor and all of that, we used to think of organizations as machines and they got to be efficient and they got to run like well-oiled and stuff like that. And how I often talk about this if I'm giving a talk is I want you to imagine you're in a team and there are four of you in the team and working really, really well. Now we think about a car of some kind and we replace a car part, a spark plug, a carburetor, anything like that, which tells you my age. I actually know what those things are. Cars don't even have those anymore.
My car does, yeah.
But if you replace like a carburetor in a car, it actually works better after you replace the carburetor. Yeah. And that's a machine. But if it's a team with four people, if you replace one person and you take them out and then bring somebody back in, how do you continue that conversation as it was from before? You can't. So the metaphor or the frame at which we look at things matters. And most of the literature around organizations, team performance, how we run companies assumes that we can run companies like machines. And it's a terrible metaphor because that's not how we work. At the end of the day, we're human beings trying to get things done. We're not parts that we can replace. I go down the street and buy a new part that works better. In fact, it's the opposite. When you bring a new person in, you slow things down for a little bit. And then you unless the other, I use sports analogies. I know some people don't like sports analogies, but I love a star substitute player.
Yeah.
You bring out a like Vince and I, we bond over football, soccer,
The
as
real
some people
football,
call it.
right? Yeah.
Soccer, as some people call it. You can bring in a player in the
Right,
second half, and he completely transforms the game, and that's a very different kind of things. And those are the metaphors we need in business today, because the metaphors we're using are outdated and they're not helpful.
Yeah. I was saying, Keita, it's been a tough week for us Calcio fans here, us Canadian Italians, with Italy not qualifying for the third World Cup in a row. It's devastating. Talk more, Keita. Your work has also taken you for the last 15 plus years, how I met you almost 10 years ago, in wealth management in Canada, as well as your work now with Family Enterprise Canada. Can you speak a little bit more about what you're seeing in the marketplace, what advisors are doing differently, how your work is helping them have these deeper conversations with families and clients?
I think so. Vince, one of the things the big thing for me is about 7 years ago when I've always been on this thing around organizations are conversations, and conversation is the action. And one of the things that has really stood out for me is that leadership is about noticing something and then saying something about it. When you get poor leadership, it's often because you've noticed something and you haven't said something about it.
Right.
And the advisors I work with, I always tell them, move to the hard conversation faster.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a topic of my next book. But the problem is really the skill. Where the problem comes up is in the delay. So most ruptures in leadership, business, family, relationships, they don't begin as a crisis, but they begin because of some kind of unspoken truth or something you noticed that you didn't say because you were protecting yourself. And I think that's the big insight that I've had recently, which is that most of our actions are because we are protecting something or someone. And one of the struggles I'm having right now as I think about writing this book, Have Hard Conversations Faster, is I think I'm going to open it by saying, before you read this book, I want to tell you that reading books about how to have hard conversations is you avoiding the hard conversation. So before you read this book, go have the hard conversation. And here's a simple framework. I might do that. But anyway, we are very, very skilled at avoiding the hard things. And we rationalize it in all kinds of ways. And I'll give you the most common example of that. Let's say Vince and I are having an argument, and I say something to Vince, and Vince might say, Keita, I don't like the tone or how you said that. That response to that tone is him avoiding what I've said to him. So this insight became very clear for me when I was listening to a woman called Esther Perel, and she said, behind every criticism is a request. So every time somebody critiques you and asks you, so Vince's wife says, Vince, pick up the socks on the floor. It's not a criticism, it's a request. It's a request to keep the house on a particular way. Your job is to deal with the request. And we're very skilled at avoiding and using legitimate ways to protect ourselves from dealing with that hard thing. And tone, I find to be one of the best examples of that. Like, we can all think about, I don't like the way you said that. Doesn't matter how I said it. What matters is I said something. Are you going to meet me there emotionally? Right?
So how do you help your clients have hard conversations faster, Keita? What do you tell them? What frameworks do you share? Because I'm thinking, and yes, my wife does tell me to pick up the socks. I'll have to speak to her later. But like, we see it too with families. I know Kristen, in our work, the last 15 years working with our family enterprise clients, man, is there avoidance in families and relationship? What are some of the things, Kristen, even that you do, or Keita, that you do with your clients to help them get unstuck? Like, they teach us this, right? Families in particular are stuck in homeostasis. They're just like, it's working. It could be better, but change is hard. We know that. I'd love to hear some from both two dear experts I work with for a long time. What are some techniques or frameworks that you share, Keita, with your clients to help them move faster?
Yeah, I think the most obvious one I use is called the ISI model, and I came up with it. It comes from something called the ladder of inference.
Yeah.
But I stands for things that are indisputable. So those are the things that we can observe. Kristen, you were late to this podcast today. Vince, you're wearing a turbo shirt. I'm joking. I'm just
Who should?
that's not even. In fact, that's even a bad example. It's because indisputable things that are indisputable, things that are like we cannot debate at all. So, something like you missed your deadline, or the sales targets were below what we agreed on. Those are in things that are indisputable.
Yeah.
And I don't like using the word facts because
Okay.
we have alternative facts because of what's happening in the world today. So I just don't use the word facts, but we are talking about facts. So I say things that are indisputable. So that's one. Then you have sense making in the middle. So sense making is your own beliefs, your own ideas. What do you bring to it? This person is trying to get me. A lot of people think people are doing things deliberately to get them. And I heard this quote recently, like most stabs in the back are actually clumsy elbows, right? So a lot of people take it as a stab in the back, but really it's a clumsy elbow, right? So that's the sense making side of that. And then I is the interpretation. So how do I interpret the fact? How did I make sense of that? And then what's my interpretation? Most of us are having conversations at the level of interpretation. We're having conversations that are like, you don't like me, therefore whatever. You don't think I'm good enough for this. Versus having that conversation at the level of those things that are indisputable. Once you start to have conversation at the level of those things that are the interpretation level, all the emotions start to fly because it's all judgment. It's all past interpretations of what happened. It's scripts you're building on versus a regulated conversation that focuses on those things that are indisputable. So that's the first framework I share with anybody that I'm working with. That makes sense?
Yeah. Note to self: don't debate Keita. That's a note.
But let's use that as an example, right? So, for example, most people think the purpose of a conversation is to win.
Yeah.
So how about we not debate to begin with? How about
to
we
be on
have
the same side of the table? Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, the first thing, like we teach this in sales, what's the topic that you're going to have in that sales conversation? What's the agreed upon topic? You have to have a topic that you're going into that conversation with. And the purpose is, I say conversation is the action. The purpose is for us to co-create or collaborate on something. The purpose is not for you to win and for me to lose. If one of us wins and one of us loses, we both lost, especially in the family space. Right? So, because even that, like I just read this great book on, I can't remember the title of it, but it's all about how families compete in these really interesting ways. And the most amazing way in which they compete is like, Vince, you're gonna love this one. You know how people like play soccer and they don't keep score because competition is bad, etc.
Yes.
I know that's exactly what you like.
No, I'm rich, right? Like, yes.
But what's interesting in that is that they end up competing on who's morally superior.
Yeah.
Like I don't do competition, and you're competing in a very different way, right? Yeah. So I think there are lots of frameworks or paradigms that we have to really rethink because we've inherited them in different ways. And my belief is most of us have this history of coming to a place. Like I am from the Caribbean in Canada. Vince, your Italian background, Kristen, I don't know your background, but most of us are people who are displaced to somewhere else. And because of that, we likely have a whole history of trauma. And how our family have dealt with that is trauma informed, or is this a piece of trauma there? And whether we believe it or not, it took me a long time to believe this. Most of my automatic habits are based on my family history and trauma and the family dynamics that I grew up in. And that's what's happening to all of us. So we have to be able to challenge those kind of things. So to say, this is my other thing. It's like, I really dislike, hey, what's the one thing that changed? Like, I don't know, man. Like, this is a complex soup. You know what I mean? Like, if the soup is super salty, you got to make another soup diluted. That you can't just like add something to like take out the salt. So that's kind of where I land on those things.
So something I'm thinking about is you're talking about the framework to have a different conversation. What I find for families is that they often if they can work with someone like you, they can get to that conversation, but then old habits die hard, and we've gotten used to kind of this dance move that we're doing with each other. And so it's very difficult to then have a new way of being on the other side of the conversation. And so how do you help families find new ways together after the conversation?
I think that's easy.
Here comes a
And
dog.
Hey,
Wyatt is fascinated by what you're saying.
there you go.
Keita, the dog likes.
Probably a better guest. Probably a better guest, more insightful than I am. And so my thing I tell at the end of every single coaching session I do with a client or session I do with something, now we've done this like workshop, whatever the topic is, I want you to do two things. I want you to notice and I want you to act. But whatever that action is should be different from what you've done in the past. So my company I have, I call it patterns in practice. Because you have to break patterns and build new practices.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to do two things. You got to notice the thing, the pattern, the habit, the thing that's not serving you or no longer serving you. And part of that is you have to understand how it was serving you in the first place. And then you have to do something different. It's that simple. And I have a really powerful example of this. I spent a lot of time in something called solution-focused therapy and counseling and stuff like that. And there's a story where this, the founders of solution-focused therapy, they were working with this gentleman and they came in for therapy and he and his wife, they were like at an impasse, etc. And they were struggling. She's like, look, I understand you all are fighting, but next time you all are getting in the fight, I just want you to notice that you get in the fight. I want you to do something different. And then so they go back home and they're supposed to do this thing. And then she notices that he's doing something different. And instead of shouting at him, she throws spaghetti at his face. And then he throws spaghetti at her. And it turns into this like all out like food fight. And then the cleaning up of the food fight, they bond and they like come back together.
Yeah.
And it's because they broke that pattern of like fighting. It sounds super, super silly.
Yeah.
But you have to break the pattern.
Yeah.
Right. So and the truth about that is that the only way you can do that is if we stay regulated, because most of us are not. We lose our brain is so hijacked we don't remember that we need to do something different in this moment.
Mm-hmm. That's what I learned so much from Dr. John Gottman and Julie Gottman from their research on how important it is to kind of monitor your heart rate and to know that when you're over 100 beats a minute, you're probably not going to accomplish a whole lot of good in the context of a conversation like that. But what tips do you have in that regard for staying regulated?
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I'm not going to answer your question,
please.
but the concept I really like is, have you heard of the window of tolerance?
No.
I don't think so. No. Wait, is it from no, keep going.
My window's open.
Yeah. So the window of tolerance is a really cool concept, I think. And the idea is that each of us has, and oh my goodness, I'll give you all the advanced part on this. But anyway, the window of tolerance is, imagine, picture a box or window. And inside that window is where you're calm and you're collected and you can have a reasonable conversation. Your heartbeat is probably below 100 beats per minute, right? Once you're outside of that window of tolerance, your heartbeat is now spiked. You're dysregulated. So that means you're either going to hyper, which is you like lash out and you shout or you whatever, or you're going to hyper, which is you hypo, where you withdraw or you retreat, right? Mm-hmm. And the goal is to stay within that window of tolerance. Mm-hmm. The really interesting piece of the research, the piece that I find most interesting in the research, is that high performers in particular have a pseudo window of tolerance. So they could be at like above 100 beats per minute, but they act as if they're within the window. And when you're talking to them, they believe they're in the window, they're acting as if they're in the window, but they're not in the window. They are dysregulated. And high performers get very, very good at that. It's precisely what makes them high performers. So the example I'll give you of that is I play a lot of football, we call it soccer, some of you. And I played, at one point in my life, I played right wing. And why that's important is the story. This guy's coming to me. He's about to pass me. And I remember thinking in my head, focus on your ball and not his feet. Because what was happening before is I was getting panicking, and I'd focus on, and I knew this particular guy was known to be a really good dribbler. He could beat anybody. And what you do is if you watch his feet, you're just getting confused. And I was like, just focus on the ball. And it was the first time I was introduced. I was 16 years old. And the first time I was introduced informally, I didn't know it. Later, I learned that was mindfulness. That's what I learned that was. That's what I was called. Yeah. That was mindfulness. And all I did was focus on the ball. And he didn't pass me all game. He passed me for the first 20 minutes. And then I was like, no. I'm just going to focus on the ball. That's staying in the window of tolerance. Once I panic, I'm outside of that window. So high performers, because they learn these things intuitively, they get very, very good at operating outside of the window of tolerance. And that's really hard as a coach and advisor, because you're talking to these people. They seem like they're in the window, but they're not. And that's hard.
Okay, this is like me occasionally at a, I don't wear the Apple Watch anymore, but I used to. And occasionally, like a tense family meeting, family members start arguing. And I have a little bit of like dysautonomia anyways. But so my watch would tell me high heart rate alert, which is not what you want your facilitator to have going on in a family meeting, right? But like I would look down and be like, this is the sign of my body reacting to what's going on, but I would still feel completely regulated. So you're giving me peace, Keita, about this.
Yeah, so I have a similar experience.
To manage that.
I wear the Aura ring.
Okay.
And one time I was doing this facilitation and it came back and I really enjoyed the facilitation. I'm like, that was awesome. We got a lot of work done. And it said I was super stressed. And the reason I was super stressed is because I was holding this really intense conversation. We got a breakthrough, etc. I love that. That's my happy place. Yeah. When I looked at the data was like, that was super stressful for you.
Yes.
You know? So yeah. Which is I like the biometrics of all of this.
It's fascinating.
As a whole different ballgame. So yeah.
Keita, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the call, and you mentioned that you are writing a new book, but this is your first book, I believe.
It is not. Well, yeah, technically.
Strategy to Action. Talk to us a little bit about the book. I know it was a labor of love for you. And then after the book, tell us where folks can find you, a little bit more about your work, who you're looking for to speak to, and then we can wrap it up.
So strategy to action is, again, it comes from my work with clients, and I found that the gap is not necessarily in how people think about a business. They know what to do, but they struggle in the execution of it. And most strategy plans end up being these thick things that people put on a shelf and they never touch. So what I was really trying to do is create a one-page strategy plan. How do I create a one-page strategy plan for people I work with? At the time, I used to work with a lot of financial advisors. That's changing a lot today, but at the time I was working with entrepreneurs in financial services in some way, shape, or form. That book, I think it came about because I was frustrated with how our clients were executing their strategies. And then during the pandemic, and they were asking, we need a book on this, we need more info. And then I wrote that during the pandemic, and that's how that book came to be. Interestingly, so one time we talked about trends today. I really believe in working from first principles. And one of the things that I'll talk about is that I think strategy comes first. So we have to figure out what is our strategy. And one of the things that's happening in my business is that a lot of companies are coming to me and say, hey, Keita, how do we manage AI in our business? How do we think about AI? And one of the things I want people to walk away with, if anybody's curious about AI today, is that whether you use ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever thing you decide to use, that's a tactic. It's a tactical thing to decide what tool you're going to use. You have to decide what is your AI strategy as a company. And most people are not doing that. Most people are just saying, hey, I'm behind on this AI thing. What tool do I need to use? Wrong question. The question is, what is my strategy around AI, and where is AI going to provide two things, leverage and where can I optimize? Those are the two things you want. In any business, you want leverage and you want optimization. So how is AI going to give me that? That's a very, very different question. And you only have two answers. You take something off the shelf or you customize or build something. The off-the-shelf tools are getting way and way better. And customization is expensive, and if things are moving so quickly, customization, you have to think about that really, really carefully. But that's where that book, I'm feeling really proud of that, is still holding true.
Yeah.
As the world is changing, that like, okay, but don't start with tactics. That the two messages I really took away in that book is start with strategy and think on a longer timeline. Think on a like extend your timeline. People think that, AI is changing so quickly. How can I plan on a 5-year timeline? If you plan on a 1-year timeline, you're screwed. That's number one. And you'll be driven by trends. You won't be driven by where you want to be.
Yeah.
So,
Fascinating comment, Keita. I think this is what we're trying to do with this, with the Family Wealth Edge, is have different conversations about family wealth. And what I love what you said there about like a one-page strategic plan. Kristen and I get inundated with, hey, can you send me a template of a constitution or a charter? And families spend years developing these documents, a lot of good work put into it, but then they don't actually live the principles that they wrote down. That goes on the shelf. It gets dusty. So I love what you said about it's the action piece, helping people. And then most families don't have an end in mind. Like there's tons of literature on this, please.
But the Constitution and the Charter is a tactic.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to start as what is our family strategy. It's like, for example, one of the things that I'm having this conversation with a company right now, they're like, we need better contracts for our subcontractors because they're not following the things. I'm like, a contract's not going to help that situation, because a contract's only helpful if you plan to sue them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the contract is not the answer.
Yeah.
We need to have clearer communication. We need to build more trust. It comes back to humans. It comes back to like my relationship with you. Do I trust you? Do I think you're going to pay me in time? Are you paying me what I'm worth? Can I, like, are we vision aligned? Are we values aligned? It comes back to those things every single time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, to your point, I think most people, because they're anxious and because they want to get things done, they focus on like, hey, I need a family constitution. And they're also doing that because they hear that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Awesome. Keita, we could maybe bring you back for part 2 as we've done with some other guests. Where can we find you, Keita? I know you're a lot on social media. Where can folks find you to find out more about you, your work?
So the thing that I learned recently is Keita Demming is very SEO friendly. There's only one of me in the world, which is great.
Lucky.
Yeah. But KeitaDemming.com is easy, or covenantgroup.com. Either way, I'm on LinkedIn, is probably where I'm most active. All the other platforms annoy me to no end. But most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me, that's the best place to find me. Or you could shoot an email to Vince, and Vince will help you find me.
I'll connect you with Keita. I just got a job. Thank you, Keita. I will send you my contract. So, everybody for listening, this is another episode of the Family Wealth Edge. Kristen.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. Keita, great insights. Thank you for your work. And we'll see you soon, folks.
Bye, Keita. Thank you.